so when I started at Decisiv, Decisiv is a company that manages the service records for fleets of vehicles. If you see an 18-wheeler going down the road, there's a 70% chance it has a Decisiv barcode on the inside that will tie it back if it comes in for service to our fleets. And we use all the data that we gather to be able to proactively suggest service for vehicles, like, hey, that part typically wears out, why don't you replace it now? And because it's much cheaper for a big fleet maintainer to take a vehicle out of service at a time when they can schedule it than it is to deal with a crisis, right? It's like DevOps for vehicles, right? It's much easier to do planned maintenance than emergency break fix work. And so when I started there, the company had grown rapidly in the past 18 months or so, but the operations team had not. They had done a major lift and shift from a physical data center into AWS, and largely started automating stuff as they needed to replace stuff. There was a lot to do there, and the team was under a tactical crunch. And like so many people had started, so much stuff was happening, they were focused solely on the tactical things they needed to do and not think larger strategy. So that's one of the reasons I was there, one of the things I started to fix. Got a few people in, started thinking about that. One of those people was Hunter. And one day, a ticket comes through our Jira board that's, I have a contractor, I need you to give production access to the database, so the console access, Rails console access on the production database. I'm like, wait a minute, what? That's not something I'm comfortable doing. I'm like, well, most of the engineering team has that already, so it's really not exposing any other risk. And at the same time, I'm going through all these documents about clients that are starting to impose things like ISO 27002 on us. And I'm like, I can't have people logging into these servers and so it was also just hard to maintain. We had setup scripts for our server fleet. It was all Ansible, and we would copy developer keys onto the box, and so somebody would leave or change their key, we'd rerun, and just a lot of maintenance for this kind of access that I didn't want people to have anyway. And at the same time, I'm getting the company to think about both a learning culture and a safety culture. Safety being that the safe thing should be the easy thing, should be the right thing. And it's taken a little bit of work to get there, that a lot of people are nervous. How am I going to test my ETL scripts if I don't have access to production? How are we going to figure out the reporting things if I don't have access to the production data? And Hunter introduced me to this tool, Gravitational Teleport, that is our first step towards locking down that access, granting it when necessary. And he's going to do a much better job than I could about talking about it and how we used it, how we got it up and running. So I'm going to turn it over to Hunter now.
So by introduced, this was the discussion we had day one. We both had to be at the headquarters, do all the paperwork. A 6-hour car ride there and back. I only talked about this. It is really good. Click. So yeah, the first big thing about Teleport is that at the end of the day, it's a managed access proxy. Bastion host is another term that comes up. I like to think that it's a bit more than that, considering all the other cool things that they built onto it. But ignoring all that, the big thing is that you have to have the access discussion. And I'm sure if anyone's been in this industry for any length of time and had to have this chat with anyone, you all know where I'm heading. People don't change. Seriously, the end user workflows that someone uses are generally set in stone. If I told all of you that you had to move over to VS Code today, either you're on VS Code or you're trying to throw me out this window. Generally what happens, and what I've seen is that these workflows get built up as the company grows, and what's okay if you have 5 developers and you could fit the entire company in the office the size of this room, doesn't happen when you hit 60, 100, 1,000 developers, because your growth rate, you don't notice as new people come in. You just wake up one day and it's like, wow, we have a lot of people. And the other thing is that people don't change unless they see a benefit. Why are you going to use Helm mode in Emacs? It's going to make Emacs slower unless it gives you a benefit. Why are you going to switch to Google Cloud? Why are you going to move out of your data center? Why are you going to buy more hardware and stick it in your office if it's not going to help you? It's time and it's effort. And, there's other things that happen that kind of mandates this. So, laptops get stolen. You read about this on the news, I think, every 2 years. It is a government laptop taken on the metro with your social security number that has gone missing. This actually happened to us. It's not fun. For the guy that got broken into, for the laptop that got stolen, like all the work involved, everyone's okay, but like, wow, I thought that this was like a fairy tale thing. It's not. There's also audits, ISO 27002, PCI DSS 9000 FedRAMP, ISO 9660, NIST 500, whatever. Like, these things come and they force change upon people, and most people don't like the idea of working in a PCI DSS environment. I used to. It was bad. The way that they got around network compliance is they disabled the ability for us to take credit cards over wireless. But because we used one of the big credit card processors, that turned off every single time that you wanted to buy a ticket for a conference or a book. You had to plug in, and it's like, where's the Ethernet jack? I'm on the MacBook with USB-C. It's a nightmare. But sometimes you have to. Like, audits will force you. People getting stuff stolen will force you. Just the scale at which you grow. This is going to happen. You have to have a plan and a way to deal with this. And the big thing is that you have to make it usable. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the work of Don Norman, like the big UX guy, and he did this really cool thing in interactions when security gets in the way. I highly suggest you read it if you're going to be talking about any of this stuff, because the big takeaway for me is that the audience either not understanding the rationale or simply disagreeing with the necessity for the procedures imposed upon them sees this as impediments to accomplishing their jobs. This is the problem that you run into whenever you try to roll this stuff out. You have to sell people a better user experience. It is not good enough to change an existing workflow to make it more secure. You have to provide something better, always. You will never be able to sell it unless you do. So let's take a little bit step back. We've all probably seen this before. User management. So you have a playbook or a chef cookbook. Nathan, you know what I'm talking about. We both work on the same cookbook. It creates accounts. It adds SSH keys. Sometimes it tries to keep the UIDs consistent across servers. Sometimes it sets up the batch profile. Sometimes it makes your editor Emacs. If you're at my former employer, it now does this. No one has realized it, and no one screamed at me on Twitter, so either they reverted it or they don't know. If you do know, don't tell me. I'd like to have my fantasy land. But that approach, there's a lot of problems with it. It's like, what happens when people join and need access? So hopefully you get your key ahead of time. GitHub's really nice about this. You can append .keys to anyone's GitHub profile and get all their SSH keys. If there's 1 year in business, if there's 20, hopefully, really, they don't need access immediately, because you have to run your script everywhere or push it to Chef and then have Chef converge everywhere, depending on how long your build takes. That could be an hour, that could be 6 hours, depending on your Chef run schedule, because you get to pick that. It could be immediately, it could be Monday at 9 a.m. I don't know why you do that. You can. And then what happens when people leave? You have to do the same thing everywhere, and revocations generally don't happen as fast as they should. I log into boxes. I found people that had left 5 years ago. They still have users. The users were still logging in somehow. Why? That's a very good story that I'm not going to put on video. There's also other things that happens about this, like what happens when access is used improperly. So what happens if someone installs something on a box that you're going to decommission, and you decommission it because it's like, I thought this box was managed, but they used their access to stick software on it. This does happen. What happens when someone goes into the app console and runs an arbitrary SQL script, or deletes a bunch of data, or goes and just messes with the user profile, and you're like, I don't know, why is the app in this state? And then what happens when one developer really, really wants to have their BlackBerry connected to the VPN and SSH into boxes? I had to have this talk with someone that it's probably not a good idea, and I don't even do it, even the fact that I have admin access on everything. Seriously, you shouldn't be diagnosing things on your BlackBerry, no matter how cool you think it makes you seem. And then the other big one that I've seen, especially when you get into semi-technical users, like the report developer who's not necessarily doing Unix every day, like how do you debug their connection issues? You have to basically do it for every box that they're having a problem with, or hope that, for one box it's the same for everything. So, like, it's not usable doing this, in my opinion. If you have another viewpoint, I'd love to hear it. Like, the big one is that end users don't have a way to understand what what state their account is in. You're saying, look, it's going to roll out over Chef over the course of a day, or look, we're running the script now. Try back, in the evening. But that's not necessarily understandable when you look at, if Amazon told you, yeah, you're going to have your EC2 instance at some point, someone would be screaming, that's an SLA violation, There's no good way to diagnose access issues. All the stuff I talked about previously, at the end of the day, me and my team, we have to deal with it when someone's abused it or someone can't access. And the other thing is when something happens, you don't get the best logging. You can go and configure it, but generally you're producing tons and tons of logs that you're never going to see. So generally the best that you get is the default, which is etc security and syslog. You can see this key connected at this time. Ta-da! And this is where Teleport comes in. So Teleport is a system for implementing highly available Bastion hosts. It handles user access and logging user sessions. It also lets you share sessions with people, which is really cool if you're like, hey, let's pair on something on this box. Here's my session token. You can join in and have control. It's great. It's really nice because it's generally stateless. Only the authentication portion has state because it's the only thing that deals with users. And there's an open source version if you're a small company. There's a paid enterprise version if you're a big company. SAML, LDAP, IDP integration, RBAC. There's also Kubernetes support. I'm not going to talk about Kubernetes support. We don't use Kubernetes. We didn't buy it, so I'm like, it's there. RBAC and SAML IDP stuff. If you don't know what those terms are, you probably don't have to worry about them. If you know what those terms are, then you really want to buy them. Trust me, it's amazing. So the really cool part about Teleport, everything's built on top of SSH. I don't know how familiar you are with the SSH protocol, but at a very high level, there's the concept of channels. So you can stick other things into SSH. So you can say SCP, it's a type of channel. Everything Teleport does, it's a type of channel. If you've ever used my preferred web host for personal things, Programmer, their entire management console is an SSH channel. You just use your public key to get access to it. You run through NetSSH. It's pretty cool. The nice part about this being on SSH, anything built on top of SSH that supports OpenSSH's configuration format works with Teleport. Ansible basically works out of the box. You change it on your config. If you use Parminko or NetSSH, which is the underlying libraries for things like Fabric and Capistrano, most chef tools are built underneath it. Inspec works essentially out of the box. You just update your SSH config to make it work with OpenSSH, and remember that you have to pass a couple of port numbers. You're fine. It's the real SSHD replacement. It's not like, oh, this is drop bear, where you're just replacing OpenSSH. It's like, you can honestly get away with running this over running SSH in port 22. It does all of your standard Unix stuff. Every single text-based tool works with it because, again, under the hood, it's the standard OpenSSH, it's the standard terminal stuff that you've come to expect out of any SSH program. Emacs, Ed, TOP, MC, all of your alternative shells work. etc password works. It makes real login sessions for systemd if you're on a RHEL-based distribution, or I guess any distribution these days, unless you're running Gentoo in the cloud, maybe. No one? Okay, you see, I wish we could, but he's going to stop me unless someone raises their hand. So, yeah, Teleport's 3 layers. It is an auth server. So this is the bit that has state. The idea is with Teleport, you set up a central auth server first. It manages users, proxies, nodes, and your clusters. This is essentially where you log in. It also keeps track of everyone that you can access with Teleport, their address, how to route to them, all that stuff. It's only the only stateful component of the system. So when doing an upgrade, if you have n number of auth servers, you have n number of times you have to actually worry about the order in which things start and the order in which things run. And I recently did a big upgrade with this. It's pretty easy. You turn off all of your auth servers, you turn one on, and then you turn everyone else on, and it'll automatically roll over. You then have proxy servers. So these are your public faces. Essentially, this is where the web interface runs. This is where all the traffic gets routed. So if you're living inside of a cloud environment where you don't want servers to be publicly accessible, you can hide everything inside the VPC and only make the proxy servers accessible to the real world. You can stick them behind load balancers if they support proxy-style network ports. You can stick them in front of ALB balancers if you only want to expose the web interface. It's pretty sweet. And then the bread and butter is the nodes. It's the servers you want to connect to. They also run Teleport. The really cool part about Teleport is one binary. You give it different config variations to turn on and off features. So if you need to save money for, hosting costs, you can run proxy and auth servers together. You can run nodes, proxy, auth servers all in one if you want to test locally. It's pretty great. These only need to be reachable by proxy and auth. So if everything's living inside the VPC and you have all of your network access set up correctly, none of your stuff has to talk to the outside world. It's pretty nice. It's nicer in many cases than dealing with a VPN because you get the security that you get through TLS and all the SSH stuff. So here's that nice Amazon diagramming tool. This is what we do at Decisiv. Since we're AWS based, we get to take full advantage of a lot of the HA stuff that you get. So we have some number of proxy servers, some number of auth servers. It's 2 and 2 for every account except for production, in which we run 3 and 4. We have our VPC resources off in the back, and then the auth server has a sessions directory, a recordings S3 bucket, sessions DynamoDB table, a recordings bucket, and an events DynamoDB table. So if we ever have to blow away an auth server, the things come back up as long as we give them, the same access to those 3 buckets. It's great. So I'm going to do a couple of small demos, and if you need them, you can grab them from my GitHub account sometime after this talk. So let's SSH into the virtual machine that I made. So I'm going to go so there's TSH. TSH is the Teleport SSH client. I'm not going to be demoing this thing because of a requirement that Teleport has for valid SNI and server names on certificates. Becomes a little bit annoying to do on this type of demo, but this is what your end users are going to be using mostly. The really nice part to keep in mind is that if they're used to using OpenSSH, every single command that they know how to do with SSH, they can prefix with TSH, SSH, and it will work out of the box. They're very good about compatibility. If you had issues with OpenSSH compatibility, you can open a ticket and they're going to address it. The real command that I'm going to talk about is tctl. If you're using Teleport and you're the admin, you're going to learn to love and or hate this. In my case, both on the same day at various times. This is Teleport's admin GUI. You make YAML files and you load this in here. If you're on the open source version, this is how you get users in. If you're doing other random things like adding and removing tokens, because to make a Teleport cluster work, you either have static tokens, which are just big long secret strings, or you can make dynamic tokens if you want to go through and get all that stuff set up, which they document on the documentation, and have a really nice examples directory in their GitHub account, which I'd highly check out if you're thinking about using this. You get to play with that, so I'm going to add myself a demo user. So you get this really nice URL, which, if, we remember that this is not secure because it made a self-signed certificate, but we know it's safe, right?
Right.
Yeah, and they enforce two-factor by default. You can turn it off. We turn it off by default, but that's also because that we force everyone to go through our SAML IDP, which enforces two-factor. So we just left it up to the IT team to manage that policy versus managing it on Teleport. Sorry, Authy is just being Authy. So we sign up, and this is the Teleport homepage. So if you're dealing with the enterprise version, there is a concept of trusted clusters. If you ever wonder, how am I going to get identities to go between my production environment and my staging environment without making them talk, trusted clusters gives you a way to do that. you essentially set up a primary cluster. In our case, we use production, and we link all of our other clusters as secondaries onto it, so all of your user settings get taken from production, given to a secondary cluster. The secondary cluster can independently process it. So you could get more advanced, say you have a reporting cluster and a application team cluster. You can say that the reporting developers get more access or less access depending on the cluster that you want. It's a very flexible system. The big one is that you also get this really nice web-based terminal interface. Like, the full thing works. I can try to install Emacs. And yeah, you know what I don't have? A root password. Yeah. How nice is that password? So yeah, that doesn't work. But, VI also works. How does anyone remember how to quit VI?
Click the red button.
No, I don't think that's
At the
it.
top. Alt F4. Alt F4.
To be fair, I do know how to use VI, but everyone likes to make that joke. Now, Ed's the scary one where we just have to close out the session. I can run top, but this is your average run-of-the-mill, BTS simulated terminal. This is really nice if there are users on Windows computers that don't necessarily want to deal with PuTTY and don't necessarily need to deal with the OpenSSH config. While the latest release of Windows 10 does have OpenSSH installed by default and Teleport version 3 and above, their client does everything to make it work, and I will flash up some docs on how to do that. It is not the best experience, and if you have people in your company using Windows, they either know exactly what they're doing and you will need to assist them with nothing whatsoever, or they're your semi-technical user and you're going to have to write a domain policy and just push it onto their laptop the next time they connect. That's actually what I'm trying to do now. Or tell me. The other nice part that they recently added, you can upload and download files. So you can upload to do that. We can pick a file, what's on my desktop, probably a random screenshot. So the file's uploaded. Oh, I just closed my session. Wow. There's my file again. You can download the same thing with the download button. And I think the big thing that sold it for me and a lot of my team is the fact that you can click on this and you can watch what was going on. You can also do this live, by the way. So if you really want to spook people out, watch for active teleport sessions, watch for people screwing up, and ping them on Slack saying, why are you in the Rails console trying to delete those records? There's an admin panel for this. I've done this twice. It spooks everyone, even when they know that they're there. It's amazing.
Only one user sort of get to do the edits and the others just viewing?
If you join a teleport session, it's the equivalent of both of you putting your hands on the keyboard, like that really bad scene from NCIS. Does enough people know what all right, yeah. I didn't know what Mark Bernadette was thinking, but But yeah, no, it's full interactive. Like what we suggest to do with developers when they want to pair on someone on a server. Oh, I can shut it off quickly. So when you're on a box, you can run the teleport command and say status. So it gives you your cluster, who you're logged in as, your host ID, your session ID, and the session URI. So if there was a multi-user cluster and you could access my laptop, I could give you this URL and we could just log in and play Tetris together. If I could get Emacs installed for Emacs Tetris. The other nice bit, I don't know how many people are in the philosophy of fight problems with tools, but something that I've been working on is you get these really nice environment variables, which is all of your teleport details. You can use these if you know that the user will only log in through teleport. And for example, I have a database, help me work with my database control panel, where it's the box that they proxy through plus teleport, so they log in and it gives them an option to make their account, reset their password, make a new schema, do whatever they need. It's pretty nice. Or I find it nice. which I'm.
So I heard someone take a picture of that, but I know that was a demo environment you set up, Hunter, so I'm not worried.
No. This is all running on my laptop.
Oh, I know. I'm calling somebody out. I heard the picture.
Again, I'm recording this. I'm gonna post. You guys gotta trust me. Where's Rob Kid? Rob trusts me, and he's slinked out, so that's Rob for you. But
you know it was recorded.
Yeah, clearly. Yeah, if you have security clearance, you lose it after talking to me. I didn't mention that, but oops. So this is the OpenSSH stuff I was talking about. I can't run these demos because I have to do them against our production infrastructure, which I'm just not going to show on video. But the really, really big thing that's really nice about Teleport is a lot of our DevOps tools were built around the concept that we have the ability to SSH into the box. And if you're familiar with the way that proxy commands work, you can go and set up these proxy commands to SSH into boxes, get the access that you need, and run these tools. So NetSSH works if you're in an environment that uses Capistrano. Inspec works if you're in an environment that uses Inspec. I have some examples of that. They provide documentation on how to get Ansible working, which is literally one line saying use SSH for SCP instead of calling the SCP program directly. Parminko works if you're using Fabric, which I have not done a demo of because I did not realize that NetSSH spoils me in automatically reading the config file for you. Parminko was like, here's 60,000 steps. And it generally works without issue. The only thing I'm going to mention is that you have to turn off strict host key checking and IP checking because of the fact that Teleport, the way that it trusts itself is it signs using its own private generated certificate authority. And there is no good way to get that certificate authority into a place that OpenSSH will use to validate it because it rotates so often and because that chunk of the code is just impenetrable for me to read. I'm sorry, but I wish I could tell you better way. So you do kind of have to turn off host key checking, which depending on the environment and your security level, this might be a non-starter for you. But at least for me, knowing that I have other security measures in place to keep